Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So, taking out an interesting video for you guys this evening because we're going to be going over Replay2, MikeJ's new FPGA board project. When I say new, honestly, it's been in development for some time now, but there are more details out there, and it's something that people always ask me about in the comments. I haven't really done many Replay2 dedicated videos yet whatsoever. I mentioned it in news, but the only reason I haven't is because there really weren't many visuals to go along with the information. As a filmmaker and a show-don't-tell sort of personality, as far as the actual videos are concerned, it was something that I kind of just had to figure out how I wanted to make. But now we do have more information as of a few days ago, as well as some new visuals, so I finally felt like it was time to talk about Replay 2. Now when we say Replay 2, we're actually talking about two different boards, the fat and the light version. The fat one is going to have an absolutely massive Agilex 5 FPGA chip on it. The light version is going to have that same Agilex 5 in a cut down version. But there's updates on the fat prototype, so we're going to go over those today. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, down below hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. If you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. And that top sentence there is definitely some shots fired status if there ever was one. But tell me in the comments, did you even know that Replay 2 was in development? There was an original Replay board, it does exist, it does run cores, it just didn't really get much market penetration. But now MikeJ is getting along in the prototyping process and has a lot of this already figured out. If we take a look at this actual mock-up of the PCB here, not real hardware, obviously just a render, you can see a lot of the different components that we'll be going over later on in the video. But the FPGA chip, obviously have an M.2 slot there as well. There is a ton of hardware on this board, and MikeJ definitely has the talent and the drive to get this thing done because he's already produced an FPGA board. So this isn't something that's just in the rendering or mock-up stages. This is something that can be a real product and probably will be a real product hopefully by the end of the year. But if we take a look at this actual just diagram here, you're going to see the fat version of that Agilex 5 is clocking it at 588,000 logic elements. Which is to say that thing is going to absolutely be a pipe-hitting beast of an FPGA chip, because if you take a look at the DE25 standard from Jurassic, which could potentially in a light variant become a theoretical Mr. 2, no guarantees, just a thought, it's going to be under 200,000 logic elements. And Taki Udon also talked about an Agilex 5 development or engineering board that could also be up in the just close to 600,000 logic element variant, and that is because that 588K logic element piece is the high end of the Agilex 5 ladder of products. And it's one of those things, if you think about Mr. FPGA that runs on the Cyclone 5 from Intel and Altera, this is going to basically be the replacement for that chip. Agilex 5 is the new generation. It's just going to do things better, faster, and allow for more things to potentially be possible in FPGA gaming development. It'll definitely be interesting to see what could potentially be done with that much logic overhead, because honestly, you think about Mr. FPGA, it's only got 110,000 logic elements and it does a ton. Additionally, on the FAT, there's going to be a daughter board add-on that's going to have a 68060 plus SD RAM, and honestly I can't even think of a single piece of gaming hardware that uses a Motorola 68060. The only thing I have in my collection beyond a 68020 is going to be this Dangerous Curves PCB from Taito that uses a Motorola 68040 processor, so I'm not even sure what that would be used for. Of course you could hand off some of the FPGA processing to an actual Motorola 68060 and have that code run, but again I'm just trying to think and presume what that would be useful for in my head. If that means we could have some awesome 3D arcade boards that use 68040s, you could sign me up right now. You know I'd be down for that because you know I love my arcade hardware. But it is one of those things. The Replay 2 isn't just the fat board or the light board. At least on the fat variant, you also have the potential to have these extra add-on boards, and putting a 68060 on board would leave it open to a lot of different developments. So I'd be curious to hear what you guys think that would be useful for. Leave me your comments down below. And if anyone's ever played Dangerous Curves or Side by Side before, tell me as well. There's a type of games that I always mention on the channel, and basically no one ever seems to know what they are in any way, shape, or form. Now speaking of add-on boards, you'll see here there is an optional compute module for a CM5 or a Raspberry Pi 5 compute module, so that could be useful just for general emulation purposes. Again, I understand it's an FPGA board, but it'd be interesting to see just what this would function for outside of something like a Pi hat for some MIDI functionality. because the Raspberry Pi 5 is definitely an emulation powerhouse. So maybe it's one of those things, if you bring over a lot of the cores, PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn, N64, but no one makes a Dreamcast core yet, you could play something like Dreamcast on that CM5 compute module and just basically have fun that way. Again, that is just software emulation, so you could just use Raspberry Pi 5 to achieve the same result. This is footage from a Pi 5 that you're watching here, but it definitely aids in the expandability of what could actually be done. But then again, that really kind of begs the question, you need developers to make hardware actually have an ecosystem. So with 588,000 logic elements, sure, you have a lot of potential, but it's the same thing with a car that has 1200 horsepower but no driver. It's not going to go fast if there isn't somebody in the car to actually make it do anything, and it's the exact same thing with hardware like this. Now, I don't want you to think I'm saying it's not going to be successful. I'm just talking about the fact that it needs developers support. If we take a look at the Agilex 5 here, you're going to see you have that hard processor, basically a CPU, an ARM A76 as well as an ARM A55, and you're also going to have two different types of RAM, including legacy RAMs that you could port Mr. FPGA cores to it without having to change up how the RAM works whatsoever. And that is one of those things. MikeJ has definitely thought about this and how they could basically get a lot of cores on something like Replay2 quickly. So putting that legacy style RAM on board means that core developers could bring those Mr. FPGA cores over and not have to deal with this new type of RAM and rewriting portions of the core to actually make it work. So that's definitely smart, and you'll see here newer cores will make use of that low latency hyper RAM, just a different version of RAM. If you've never heard of hyper RAM before, don't worry about it. There's so many different types of RAM out there. There's a lot that even I haven't heard of. Hyper RAM is one I have, but it's one of those things. If it doesn't sound familiar, it won't be that big of a deal. But honestly, this would clearly run everything Mr. FPGA ran, but it would need to have new exciting cores to actually get that foundational base, because if it runs everything Mr. FPGA runs, then it is just a Mr. FPGA, even if it's not positioning itself that way. So the question is, with 588,000 logic elements, what could it run? Obviously, Dreamcast would be a prime candidate, but outside of that, some more powerful arcade boards, maybe the N64 core could just get that RAM timing to be a perfection sort of situation. It would be hard to say, but obviously on the N64 front and the Sega Saturn front, you would be having those run on something like Replay2 with no issues whatsoever after the core developers brought them over and got them set up, because even though it does have that legacy RAM and does run on an Intel and Altera chip, it still requires some work to actually make it work. So that, I just want you to realize, it isn't a drag and drop thing. You don't take the Mr. FPGA core, drag it into a Replay2 folder, and have it loading up on your system. But the nice thing is, this is going to have a 4K output, and that's something that people have been definitely asking for basically every FPGA console out there. They want 4K. So taking a look at some 4K footage from Mr. FPGA that I scaled up to 4K with my RetroTink 4K, that would definitely be a huge selling point, because basically we all have 4K TVs at this point in time. A lot of us have OLEDs as well, so if you're in a situation where you had an FPGA board that could run all the Mr. FPGA cores that had native 4K output with a scaler, and you didn't have to put a RetroTink or a more 4K in the chain, that would definitely be something that would be a cost-effective and very attractive proposition, because even when we talk about that Jurassic DE25 potentially being a Mr. 2, it does not have 4K output on it, and I would say that's definitely the #1 request of something like a Mr. 2. People want 4K out. They even want to be able to maybe do 4K 120 if it's possible, but 4K 60 basically being the minimum. So you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, is 4K a huge selling point and something that would make you pick up a new generation of FPGA hardware, or do you really just want to play it for the cores? Because again, I don't know what the price on this thing would be, so it might just be something like you want a RetroTink 4K anyway, but it is nice to see that 4K is going to be an output option on the resolution front. And if we take a look at the backside of this mod computer, you're going to see it has both USB A and C, as well as an HDMI port. Looks like some analog audio outs, Ethernet, that HD15 port, which would be for analog video, and an optical or Toslink port there as well. Now, there apparently is still a little bit of work to do here, especially on the DDR4 RAM with the trace length. And if you don't know what that means, basically all those signals, you want to have them all communicating at the exact same time at the exact same speed. So if one of your traces is too long or too short, you could actually have a situation where you had that data coming in ever so slightly faster slow. We're talking about faster slow in time frames that you would absolutely not perceive. It's only measured by equipment, but it is important, especially for a lot of the systems that would be sensitive to that RAM timing, like Sega Saturn or Nintendo 64. But MikeJ is definitely getting into the nitty gritty here as well. I love that they put up some other actual designs from all of the trace routing. If this doesn't look like anything other than some very rainbow colored spaghetti, this is how every single trace moves around the Replay2 prototype board. If it's blue and marked GND, that is a ground. Everything else is going to be a signal, and this is how much work you have to do to actually get a board functioning. But MikeJ definitely is putting in the work. But you leave me a comment down below, and I'm really curious to hear, did you know about Replay2 before this video or not? And do you want to see more coverage of it? Obviously, like I said, I'm a very visual person, so I like to be able to show photographs and diagrams along with things, and a lot of the update posts have just been text, and I don't find that all that interesting just from a visual perspective presenting it to you. But I'm definitely looking forward to checking out Replay2 at some point in time and seeing what core developers might want to make cores for it. But there's another FPGA project in the cards, pun incredibly intended here, and it's going to be fun to see what it does in the future. But short of that, we're done. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.